Okay, good evening, everyone. You're very welcome to the Ulster Grassland Society Spring Seminar. Those of you that are members of the Society will know at this stage of the year, we normally have a spring farm walk, but because of COVID and lockdown and the rules and regulations that we have to adhere to, that can't happen. So we're using that to our advantage this evening, and the Executive Committee have organised a meeting which I think should be of great interest to all. Okay, as I say, the Ulster Grassland Society is becoming ever more cosmopolitan, and this evening we're heading west across the Atlantic. We have two fantastic speakers tonight. Firstly, Vicky Morrison and Rodney Elliott, both of them very well known. So first of all, we go to Ontario, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome Vicky to this Grassland Society webinar. Vicky originates from County Antrim, where she grew up on a mixed farm in Kells. Further to qualifying with a degree, she studied for her PhD at AFBI in Hillsborough. Vicky joined Caffrey in the early noughties as a dairy technologist, where she worked hands-on with the Greenmount dairy herds. Work included focus on improving milk quality and a publication and partnership with LMC called Adding Value to Cull Cows. In 2006, Vicky, along with her husband William, purchased a farm in Ontario, moving there in 2007 with their young family. Vicky, I know that you will have an interesting story to tell about this move and adapting to a new life in a new country, and also your latest challenge, that of becoming a farmer representative on the board of Dairy Farmers of Ontario. Vicky, I'll now hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Harold. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with everybody, and I'm just going to hope the technology works now. Excellent, everything's going the way it's supposed to. So thank you for coming, everybody, tonight, and I hope that Rodney and I'll have some interesting things to tell you about making a big hop across the pond. So as you can see from the picture here, we've moved on a little bit from 2007, and Jane is 13 and Scott is 17, soon to be 18. And we're now farming in the very, very, very southwest of Ontario. As Harold said, both of us were born to be farmers, and I thought I'd just include that little picture of myself whenever I think I was 3. Helping my dad with the lambs, and I know William and I took different paths in our agricultural education, but it's funny that both of us at the end of it all ended up at Greenmount. So William as a student in the 90s, and me as a dairy technologist in the noughties, as Harold said, and hearing lots of stories about what William got up to whenever he was there. But you know what? I think even now I look back on those days with great pleasure, because, you know, it's a great community in Northern Ireland, and if anybody could ask for a grounding in agriculture, that's where you're going to get it. And maybe a grounding and given a bit of stick too. So William and I got married in 2002, and Scott was born in 2003. And at that point in time, you'll all remember, that was when the first rumblings started that quota was going to be leaving. People were starting to get a little bit more nervous about what the future held. There was CAP, there was all sorts of things, and farming was getting to become a little bit more dependent on Europe and the rules from Europe and the paperwork. You know, some of the older farmers were drowning in the paperwork that had to be done, and we just wanted a secure future for Scott. Like, from Scott was able to walk, that was all he ever wanted to do, tractors and farming. And if you could see him right now today, he's probably clobbered to the eyeballs outside with his daddy, doing what he loves. So William and I had visited Canada on a few occasions, both before we had got married and since. Our first visit, I think, was in 2001, just before September 11. And then we came to Ontario the second 2 times that we came to visit, once in 2003 and once in 2005. And the bug, oh, William was bit by the bug, and he was bit hard. And by 2006, we had convinced his dad that this was maybe something that we should actually consider. So he came out with us in early 2006 to look at some farms in Ontario. It took us a few goes, but eventually we found the farm that we wanted. And we were so very fortunate that William's father sold one of his farms, the home farm, to actually allow us to follow our dreams. So this is what we bought the first time around, and this is where Ballybright Farms was born. And I have to thank Michael Graham, if he's on here tonight, for assistance with naming of the farm. And this was a 98 kg freestall dairy farm. So 98 kg is a very Canadian term, and it is relates to the number of kilograms of butterfat that each farm can produce on a daily basis. And that equates to around 2,500 litres of milk at 4% fat. So we were very fortunate when we bought this farm. It was on 100 acres itself, but there was 100 acres on the same road for sale at the same time. So we had ourselves our 100 kilos of quota and our 200 acres of land and dreams beyond abundance, and we were set to go. But it was a steep learning curve because, you know, people think, oh, milking cows is milking cows. You know, why would it be any different if you did it in a different country? Well, I've never milked cows in 38-degree heat before, but that was something else. Like I understand why they joked about people milking in their Speedos in Canada, because the humidity some days in July it would choke a donkey. So we had to learn about the heat. We had to learn about the cold as well, because that first winter was pretty tight too. And then we had to learn about keeping cows in all year round, which was not new, was new for us too. And we learned about the new crops, we learned about the new veterinary system, we learned about, you know, the policies related to producing milk in another country and the policies around quota. And as most of you will know, that Dairy Farmers of Ontario is the single pool of milk. So whenever I sell my milk, it's sold to Dairy Farmers of Ontario and the processors then buy from them. So it's also a different system to what we were used to. So it means that all the dairy farmers in Ontario are paid on the same scale and follow the same rules. And actually our animal welfare and our what we call pro-action, so it would be similar to your little red tractor rules, are actually Canada-wide. So everything that's done is actually done from Dairy Farmers of Canada as opposed to the provincial organizations. Add to that we had a little boy, and then within a year we had a little girl, and you can see that our lives were pretty busy for the first little bit. But you know what, William and I came to that farm and we saw potential, we saw what we thought we could make it. And so we had a plan, or so we thought. But change is good and plans don't always go to fruition. So the first things that you will have noticed, there was tar silos on that farm, and William and I, not akin to those, decided that right away we should change over to the regular concrete walled silos that we were used to from home. And we did that. That was the first thing we did. The second thing we did was we improved our utilization of our square footage in the barn by actually moving our milking parlour to the other side and creating more space in the barn so that we could we didn't have to house our heifers out at another facility. So that meant we were bringing all our animals home. So you can see that new parlour up in the top left-hand corner of the screen, and the front part of the barn with the parlour extension added onto it. We also changed the feed alley. So whenever Mr. Haskett had built that barn, it was a drive-through feed alley, but he decided that it was a really good idea to plant round bales of hay right down through the middle of it so that he could fork it off for the cows instead of throwing it in his TMR wagon. So the first thing we actually did was remove those bales of hay from the middle of the feed alley and drive a mixer wagon down through it so that you could feed the cows, not using a thing the size of a motorized wheelbarrow. So, you know, there was efficiencies to be made. We were very lucky. He had good staff and they stayed with us. So it made the learning curve a little easier when you could ask a question. But as we went through our time there and as we got towards 2010, 2011, you know, we lost some of those young kids that we started out with, and they went off and they got jobs in the real world, and it was harder and harder to get help. So we actually moved ourselves in 2011, 2012 down the robotic route. And roughly at the same time as doing that, I got an opportunity to go back to my roots, which was my PhD in ruminant nutrition. And I was asked if I would cannulate some cows in my barn to supply rumen fluid to the labs. So I actually had 5 cannulated cows at the end of it all. And you can see Dot there, she was pretty famous. She got to go to the CDX dairy show, I think 2 or 3 years in a row, to be a demo cow. for a product that they could use to suck rumen juice out, but you could also use it. I'm sure you've seen them, the rumen drenchers at home. So Dot was famous. She got to go to the show every year, and on a Wednesday morning, I made about $400 before everybody else got out of bed. So that was my own little side business, and we forayed in with the Bomatic robots, and I wish I could say they were awesome, but unfortunately they were not. And they may have been a factor in the choices that we made to move on, but they certainly milked the cows, but I wouldn't say that I would go back and buy some more, put it that way. So as Goldilocks says, you know, when she tastes baby bear's porridge and she says, oh, that's just right. So William has a habit of whenever we've got something that's just right, he thinks, but what if we could? And at the same time as William said, what if we could, the quota rules in Ontario started to change and things tightened up. So whenever we moved at the start, the quota exchange was pay what you bid. So you could pay, and people were paying $35,000, $40,000 per kilo for quota. Whenever we bought the ongoing operation, we paid $30,000 per kilo and $5,000 per acre of land. So you can see that, you know, there's a significant investment to start milking in Canada, just in the quota alone. So whenever we got to our just right spot, William said, you know what, this cap's on the quota and there's not very much available on the exchange anymore. And, you know, the average is getting closer to 100 kilos. And by that stage, we had worked our way up to 115 kilos of quota. Land had gone from $5,000 an acre to $20,000 an acre in our area in that 6-year period. So we were at a point where we knew that something had to give or something had to change, because we always felt that we needed to be that bit more than the average. And so it happened to be one day that a real estate agent that lived beside us had got a rumbling of our discontent and asked us to come for a ride and put on our rose tinted spectacles. So we did, and this is where he brought us. As you can see, it was more than a project. It was, for want of better words, it was a shithole. And it was in the very, very, very southwest corner of Ontario. We're about 20 minutes east of Windsor, which I was explaining to Rodney, is just over the border from Detroit in the United States. So I can actually be in Detroit faster than I can be in any other major city in Canada. So we put on our rose tinted spectacles and we opened the door of the vehicle that we were traveling in, and we wondered, should we put our boots on before we got out? Because you really didn't know where you were going to land when your feet hit the floor. But the guy was about to lose it. It was a bankruptcy and there was positives with it. I know it looks rough, and that puddle in that big middle picture, if you had stepped in that, you probably would have landed around your waist in the water. The milking parlor, you can see there, it was functional, but the wire that ran the pumps actually laid on the ground and went from the panel to the milk pumps. And on the first night that we milked cows there, we almost set the barn on fire. So it was an experience, but William and I kind of looked past the mess, looked at what we could do with it. And we did put our rose tinted glasses on, and we did eventually travel the 230 kilometers it was from Bright to where we now live, which is called Woodsley. And William actually drove almost all the machinery from Bright to Woodsley down the 230 kilometers, and we brought hay because there was no feed on this farm. There was basically nothing. So we bought a bare farm with 178 kgs of quota, and we were able again to buy the farm next door. So we got ourselves 350 acres. And the really frightening thing about it was that when we sold our farm in Bright with 115 kilos and 200 acres, we didn't spend a single penny more to buy the 178 kgs and 350 acres. So it was, for many, a brave move, but for us, it was a financially smart move. So to get things ship shape, we actually had to put our cows out for a little bit. And in Ontario, when you have what they call this is actually classified as a disaster. So we were actually able to invoke the disasters procedure, and we were able to put our quota with 2 other farmers, and they filled it for us. And then we pay them, I think it usually ends up being about 60-40. So we paid them 60% of our milk check, and we got to keep 40% to help us with paying to fix things. So fixing things required quite a lot of stuff. We'll show you on some of the next slides some of the things we had to do. But not only did we gain 170 or 60 odd kgs of quota and 150 acres of land, we gained a community. It's amazing the people down here. There's only 8 dairy farmers left. I think there was 12 whenever we came here. There's only 8 dairy farms left in Essex County. And there's only 15 between here and London. So it's a long way to get another dairy farm and a long way to get dairy supplies. But I wouldn't give up this community for anything. So as you can see, this is a picture of our yard site that was taken last year. So actually the longer green roof building that sits beside the white roof building is now the same length as the white roof building. So we've extended that barn. Those 3 manure pits that you see, we had to build those. The bunker silos, we had to build those. The heifer barn, the coverall, the shop, the house. There wasn't many things we didn't have to almost start again, but I suppose in a way that was a draw for us because it was almost a blank canvas. But the bit that we really liked most was that we now have 350 acres around the house. And about the only good thing that the farmer before us left us is that from this yard site, so at the back of the heifer barn that is vertical, there is a point where we can actually hook a drag line on, and it takes the drag line under the road and it comes up on the other side into our field on the other side. And that's about the only good thing that guy left us. So we're actually able to drag line the whole farm without having to cross the road. So we don't have to use tankers or any of those things. It's a pretty slick system. As you can see, there's been, we've picked up several farms in that block. We're now trying to bring out the ditches and those sorts of things. That's one thing that in this area can be an issue. The ditches are quite deep because the land is very, very flat here. And for those that love gathering stones, there's no stones to gather in Essex County. So that's always a benefit when you go to seed grass, seed down, there's no stones to gather. So if I go out the back of my house, if I walk for about 45 minutes, I can get to the back of the farm either way. So as you can see, 2021, 7.5 years on, and we've made big changes. We had to rewire the barn. We brought the milk cooler inside, and that milk cooler holds around 19,000 litres, which for us is just slightly under 3 days. We have coverall feed storage built. We had to build 3 manure pits, and actually where that green roofed heifer barn is right now, that used to be where the manure pits were. We built 5 bunker silos, we built commodity bays, we did a total renovation of that steep roof heifer barn. We built a link building to the existing milk cow barn. We built a dry cow and heifer barn. And this is also a flush barn like we had previously, but all the alleyways were laid the wrong direction. So whenever you lay for flush barn, you put your barn at 2%, but you're supposed to lay your alleyways with a slight tilt towards the back of your stalls, so that whenever the flush water goes, that it actually carries the manure to the end of the barn. Ours were all laid with a 2% slope, but they were also laid with a tilt towards the feed alley or the outside wall. So then we only discovered this after we put our cows back in the barn. So it was a wee bit of a job to actually work around the cows and relay the alleyways, and to actually speed the process, we ended up putting the front alleyways of each group onto rubber. And I think that's one of the best investments that we've actually made, because since we put that rubber down, we haven't lost a single cow to doing the splits. And I think it was about $30,000 to do the 2 sides of the barn. And it really was a fantastic investment. But it sounds really weird when the cows get excited, because it sounds like they're playing basketball. The last thing that was on the list was to actually make the house livable, because there wasn't a door that closed properly on the dwelling house and this farm. And my husband is by no means house proud, and he never notices the dust, and he never complains if I happen to get behind. But when he walked in that house and he closed the door, he promised that he'd never make me live there. So that tells you how bad it was. So now you want down to the nitty gritty of what we're actually doing here. So from our 178 kgs of quota, we really lucked out. And in the short time period between us getting rid of the quota for a few months and getting back in again, there was huge jumps in the amount of quota that was required to fill demand in Ontario and in the P5 and in Canada in general. So right now, with all sorts of work and all sorts of bidding on our quota, we now have 255 kgs of quota, which is 255 kilos of butterfat production per day. And that equates to around 13,000 litres every other day. So about 6,500, 7,000 litres per day we actually produce here. So we have 200 cows, including milk cows and dry cows. And at the minute, we're doing about 37 litres at 4% fat and 3.3% protein on twice a day milking, because experienced labour down here is an issue. And I have a feeling we might be going down Rodney's route probably sooner rather than later, just because it's really hard to get skilled labour. And actually quite often it's the women that want to work on dairy farms, and the two women that we have had in the last little bit, one has just had a baby and the other one is going off this year to have a baby. So we're a wee bit short right now. And we do all that on about 2 tons of supplement per cow per year. And our average is around 11,500 litres per cow. Our average days in milk is about 162. And you'll hear chat from Canada about your solid non-fat ratio. So at the minute, we have a huge demand for butterfat here in Canada, but we have difficulties maybe always making best use of the protein and lactose components of the milk. So we're actually asking farmers to reduce their solid non-fat ratio. So we're asking them to increase their butterfat production, but to reduce the amount of protein and lactose that they're actually shipping. So we have included an increase in price to those that can produce a solid non-fat of below 2. We're not that fortunate. I'd love to be below 2, but it's actually more financially viable for Holstein herds to sit between 2.2 and 2.3. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now. And I'll not make you too sick. I'll tell you what my March milk price was. It was 81.9 cents per litre, or $19 and almost 75 cents per kilo of butterfat. So that equates to about 47 pence a litre whenever you use the exchange rate. So because we're a daily quota system, we actually have to basically milk the same number of cows all year round. So our aim is to calve about 15 to 20 cows a month. And we're milking now in a double 10 parallel de Laval parlour. William is a de Laval trained technician, and he picked that up in Northern Ireland before we left. So it's very handy, and our servicing costs are very minimal. That was the reason why we left Bomatic, which is what was there before. They were charging us about $10,000 a year just to service our milking equipment. So that was the reason for the move to de Laval. In the last year, we've started genomic testing our heifers in a hope that we can actually start to bring in a more uniform group of animals. And we're bringing our next generation into the business. As I said, Scott will be 18 this year. And in the last 3 or 4 years, the Agricultural College, about an hour away from here at Ridgetown, has started actually an apprenticeship program. So instead of Scott going and learning about all the different aspects of agriculture, he actually will stay here on the farm, and 1 week in the month, from September to April, he will go to the college and they will teach him dairy farming skills. So equipment maintenance, AI, hoof trimming, all those things, and they will actually take him out onto other farms around the province, and they will have expert speakers come in. So it's a very specialized training course that's actually been developed in the last 3 or 4 years. And I'm very glad that he's going to be able to take part in that, because with all these COVID rules, it's actually the only class that is running in person right now. So I really appreciate that, because online school is not for him. So I mentioned a little bit there that we had genomically tested our heifers, and we are actually going by those results now. We split them into 3 groups. So the first group, our top end group, are bred all sex semen. The middle group, we have actually started to do some embryo work. I've bought a couple, much to William's disgust, I have bought a couple of pricey heifers at a sale a couple of weeks ago, and we're actually doing IVF with them to put some embryos into that middle of the road bunch. And the bottom end of our heifers are going to be purely bred beef. Only our best cows, and I select personally the cows that get bred to sex semen, because I'm the one that milks in the morning. So I decide who gets what. We're breeding all A2 because I have Crohn's disease and I cannot tolerate regular dairy. So we have actually made the move to taking our whole herd to A2. And it was actually a very nice surprise to find when we genomically tested our heifers that we had one A1 heifer, and 72% of our heifers were A2. And we have only been breeding that way for about 4.5 to 5 years. So that was a pleasant surprise for us, that it won't be too long before we're where we want to be. So basically we breed for the top end of GLPI. We're a freestall barn, so feet and legs are major. It's a sand bedded barn, so it's really good for cow comfort. We go for positive components and as high above 1,000 as we can for milk. And we're actually mostly ST genetics. Now, I mentioned before how few dairy farmers there are down here, and sometimes when it comes to things like AI companies or milking equipment or anything to do with dairy farming, you kind of have to go with who comes to you, because ST and I think Gen X are the only two that regularly come this way. We do buy some from Gen X, but the guys just retired, so we haven't been buying so much from them. So it's the majority is ST genetics. But it's a challenge sometimes, and William, even through all of these lockdowns and all the things that we've been going through, he quite enjoys going for a wee jolly to go and get parts. So if we want something, we have to go get it. We are lucky that we have, it's a mainly arable area down here, or what we call cash crop, but we do have good neighbours and good friends with equipment. We own most of the harvesting equipment ourselves. The only thing we don't own is a harvester. So the neighbour owns the John Deere self-propelled harvester. Another neighbour owns the square baler. We own the rake. We just brought Smith trailers in 2019. We got the 9-foot wide ones that you can't have in Northern Ireland. So we think we get about 55 to 60 cubic meters in one of those trailers, and it's quite the job whenever you see that tipped up in a big pile. As you can see from the bottom picture, that's our grass probably about a week ago. Our alfalfa and ryegrass is what we sow here. We sow 50% alfalfa, 50% ryegrass, because the ryegrass gives us the bulk for first cut every year, and the alfalfa likes it when it gets dry in the summertime. So we get a good cut at the beginning of the summer and the end of the summer with the ryegrass in it, and then in the summertime, whenever it can get really hot and really dry here, the alfalfa takes over. So we actually get a good balance and enough crop to do us throughout the year. And actually the picture that's in the bottom corner with Scott raking, that was actually our 4th cut that we took in September last year. So whenever it comes to making our rations, we actually use an independent ration formulator, because we like to be able to tender for our feed, because it's a significant amount of money for us every month. It's about $500 a ton for our feed supply, but we don't actually feed significantly. It's 6 to 7 kilos per head per cow per day, depending on the time of year, depending on the ration. It's mostly protein. And then the rest of the diet is about 60% corn silage, 40% between hay and what they call haylage, which is usually about 30% dry matter, and our corn silage is usually around 40% dry matter. So collecting the effluent is not an issue here. The dry cows are fed basically a corn silage and straw based diet with a small amount of protein mineral carrier. Our weanling heifers are fed on a straw and pellet ration. We're really pleased with that. We have seen great development of heifers on that ration. And the last part of this is the rest of the heifers, and they're mostly whatever's left. We actually grew some triticale and harvested it, and the heifers did really, really well on the triticale diet the year before. So we might do that again. We don't have any of that for this year, but sometimes we try to make dry red clover bales. So that's quite often what they get fed. So it'll be red clover and a little bit of straw usually to stretch it out, and just mineral. So they kind of get whatever's left over. But as I said before, what we really gained down here was a community. And, you know, Dairy Farmers of Ontario is set up very differently because it's one group and one pool. So every county has a dairy producer committee, and that's where you get your grounding to be able to go forward and, you know, maybe have the chance of representing your area. So whenever we were in Oxford County, there was probably about 400 to 500 farmers in that county. So to actually be able to get in there and join the committee and get to the nitty-gritty of things was really not an option for somebody that was new to the community. We came down here and we were welcomed with open arms. The people couldn't wait to get somebody new in that was actually going to tidy up the farm that they were kind of embarrassed about. So it wasn't very long before I got voted onto the milk committee, because as William says, the women have time to go and yak about it. The men have to do the work. So that's why I'm here today. But the community were so excited and they couldn't wait to see the progress. And as you can see from the picture in the middle at the top, we hosted a dinner for 400 people on the farm. I got involved with the 4-H kids as well, which is kind of like, I suppose, the junior Holstein breeders. And Jane has won pretty good prizes at the Junior Holstein show with Holstein Canada, and Scott has represented Essex County at the Royal now for 3 years. The both of them actually took their own herds to the Junior All Ontario program in 2019, and they won top herds people whenever they were there, and Jane won second place in junior showmanship, and Scott won third place with one of our March heifers. So they really, really love their showing. They love getting out. They love meeting the people from the other counties. And then as I saw them getting up and getting independent, the former board member for this area approached me and said, do you know what? I want to retire a year early. Do you think you would run? And I kind of looked at him and I went, are you nuts? And he says, go home and think about it. He says, you know, there's no point in you. And he says, you're one of the vocal ones. He says, if you don't like something, you'll tell me. He says, why don't you actually go to the board table and tell them what you think? So we went home and we thought about it and we wondered, because at that point, you know, there was a lot of travel involved in this, and there's a lot of going to Toronto and a lot of generally sitting at meetings. And when I put my name up for the election and I won, William's like, what have we done? You know, you're going to be gone, you know, 2 weeks out of the month at meetings. And lo and behold, two and a half months into the role. So I started in January 2020. 2.5 months into the role and COVID hit, and I haven't been left home for a meeting since then. So it's worked out pretty good, actually. So I kind of have become an expert at virtual meetings, and you can see in the top right hand corner, I meet quite regularly with some of our local politicians as well. And I was telling your executive team yesterday that I spent all day lobbying our provincial politicians yesterday. I did 12 meetings. Trying to make sure that the voice of our dairy farmers is heard at provincial parliament. So you asked me what the challenges were. And I think coming from Northern Ireland, the first challenge is the weather. But when I put that picture up there, I kind of thought to myself, you know, there's something really nice about being the first person out in the snow in the morning. And we don't think about the cold the way we used to anymore, because when you go down into it and you come up out of it, it's just different. And I know sometimes it can get pretty cold, but not nearly as cold as Rodney. But we enjoy it, and we maybe don't enjoy the humidity of the summertime down here, because we've kind of figured it out. We're roughly at the same latitude as Rome here, so it gets pretty humid in the summertime. We can get up to 42 to 44 degrees with humidex, so it gets pretty hot and pretty sticky around here. So one of the first things we did when we fixed up the house was put in a pool, so that we can put yappy children in there. I have my Canadian passport there, and that's because immigration is not easy. It's a challenge, and we didn't go about it a conventional route. We went through getting work permits first, and then going for our Canadian PR cards. And then eventually after a few years, we actually went and got our passports, because we realized the first time we crossed the American border that it was a whole load of hassle on a United Kingdom passport, and we really didn't want to do that again. The other thing that I wanted to mention is family. And everybody, you know, it's lovely to see us out here, and we really enjoy being out here. But things like this year have really brought home the fact that we are out here, and we are a long, long way from home, and there are a lot of things that we miss. And it's a challenge to raise a family without the support of my mum and William's mum and my sister and William's sisters, and just those people that when the shit hits the fan that you would turn to say, can you mind my kids for an hour? And you just don't have that. The other thing that's a challenge, and I put this one picture in here, is the cows are a challenge. You know, some days I think Canadian cows have sheep genes, because it doesn't matter what you do some days, and I know it's the same in Northern Ireland, you have those days where nothing goes right and everything goes wrong and somebody ends up with their 4 feet in the air. I really hope it doesn't happen to that cow, because that one happens to belong to Scott, and she's just gone excellent. So I really hope it doesn't happen with that one. As I said at the very start, learning the rules and regulations is also a challenge. Whenever we left to come to Canada, there was no paperwork involved in this whatsoever. Your cows left home, you didn't send a permit with them. You did all sorts of things and you didn't have to write it down. You didn't have to write down when you needled a cow. If you chose to write down when you bred a cow, that was up to you. That was up to your records. But a lot of stuff you just didn't have to do. Right now, it's changed. Since 2011, we have ProAction. So we have animal welfare inspections conducted by Holstein Canada. We have our quota policies. We have our raw milk quality policies. So we have to be grade A all the time. We just did ours. Our milk inspector has to visit you every 2 years. We are now getting independent validations for a lot of those inspections. So there will be independent people coming in to make sure. But we're very proud of the fact that we've always had excellent milk quality, and we've won a gold award every year since we moved to Canada. So we're really, really, really proud of the fact that we can make good, clean quality milk. I think in general, sustainability is going to be a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to say, hey, you know, all those things you say about cow farts and all those things you say about, you know, agricultural machinery, if you actually looked at what you were doing with your airplanes and your cars and all those things, you know, we're not actually that bad. And if you are to look at the carbon balance of a lot of farms, we're actually carbon zero or carbon neutral. So I think there's a challenge there for us, but there's also an opportunity to tell our story. And the other thing that's really important is getting the consumer on board. And I think no matter what country you live in, we saw what happened at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. Ontario, actually, as far as Canada went, did a really good job. We only dumped 1/2 a day's milk through the whole pandemic, and it was done within the first 2 weeks. So right now we're actually sitting, and I just had a promotion committee meeting this morning, and according to 2 years ago, so before the pandemic, we're actually up 6% on all dairy consumption across Canada. So I think we've weathered the pandemic well, and there is an opportunity now to talk to our consumers. We have a captive audience. They're all at home. They're all baking. They're all cooking. They're all actually having breakfast at home again, which is something that in Canada they just didn't do. And I just think there's so many opportunities out there for us, and opportunities because of the virtual nature of things that we do. Like under a normal time, the UGS, you know, I wouldn't have considered coming home just to do this. If it had worked in that I was coming home to visit my parents or something like that, yeah, for sure. But it didn't justify me paying a flight to do this. Whereas now in this virtual world, you get to talk to me, you get to talk to Rodney. We have time to do these things. We have time to meet with people. We have time to make a difference. And I think that's the most important thing for us. But I think, you know, we've been here 14 and a bit years now, and I don't miss the place anymore. I only miss the people now. And I think that was the biggest challenge for me, was missing the people. And I know this year, William and I both faced a bit of a challenge because we lost a really good friend and we couldn't come home. And it's when things like that happen that you realize that You know, you are an awfully long way from Northern Ireland. But at the end of it all, we got what we wanted. We got a farm that is sustainable. We got a farm that is economically sustainable as well as environmentally sustainable. We have a place for our boy to come home to. And actually, if Jane wants to, we're actually considering maybe starting some kind of an on-farm processing venture that actually we could bring Jane into the business too. So those are all thoughts for the future. As you can see, we don't stop very long around here. There's always a new plan. There's always something new happening. So if you have any questions on the Canadian dairy industry, please shout them now.
Okay, Vicky, that was a very interesting and a very honest presentation, and what comes across to me is the strides that you have made in 14 years in Canada. It's absolutely amazing. You're certainly not afraid of a challenge at all, but it certainly seems to be agreeing with you. And it's congratulations on working yourself into such a fantastic farm. 350 acres in a block would be anybody's dream over here. Look, there's a number of questions has come through here, so we'll move straight into the questions. So first question from Jim Freeburn. Vicky, what attributes did you bring from Northern Ireland?
I think hard work and stubbornness, Jim, I think would be the first thing that we would have brought with us. I think both of us were raised on farms where you were always learned if you fell off the horse, you got back on again. And it's funny whenever you say that. I wrote this down earlier on today. I listened to this guy on Facebook in the mornings at 7 o'clock. I told these guys yesterday I have a broken wing, so I can't milk. So I have been listening to this on Facebook, and he said, fear and faith both demand you to believe in something you cannot see. You choose which one you do. So I think William and I brought the faith that we could do it, and maybe a vision that other people maybe didn't have, to taking the farm into something that we thought it could be.
Okay, thanks, Vicky. Moving on to the next one from Alan Hops. Any comment on the recent palm oil butter issue in Canada, and any lessons from it for us in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, there are a lot of lessons to be learned from the palm oil issue. I think the fact that we already knew it was there, I think it was sitting there. And unfortunately, we have a guy called Sylvain Charlebois, and he resides as a professor at a university called Dalhousie in Ontario. And Sylvain Charlebois would like nothing more than the quota system to be dismantled and for Canadian dairy farmers to have to work in a free system. So when he saw this lady innocently posting that her butter had got a little bit harder, he threw in the palm oil grenade, for want of a better word. And I think what we should have done is been ready for it, because we knew it was there. We knew for sustainability wise it was an issue. But what it really pointed out to us as an industry is that consumers themselves don't actually realize what's in their food. Because if you look at your margarine container, and if you look at all those processed foods that people want to eat, palm oil's in there. But they don't actually realize that it's there. They don't realize what they're eating. So I think what we've learned is we have to be ahead of the game and be prepared. The other thing that we have learned is, and actually we don't actually use palm oil here at all. Our nutritionist prefers to use flaxseed. So there are farmers who can have a decent fat and produce good quality milk without using it. So it's not necessary, but I don't believe that Dairy Farmers of Canada necessarily handled it the right way either. And we wanted to handle it as a united voice because it was a countrywide issue. And I think what would have been better is to not, what they asked for was that producers reduce the use of it. I think by doing that, we possibly laid ourselves open that, if something else comes up at another time, consumers may ask for us to take that out of rations as well. So I think we would have been better just to let it die quietly. And but we are actually, there's a group of scientists and industry representatives looking into the issue right now to see if there actually is some correlation with it.
Okay, Vicky, you alluded to quotas there in your answer. So just moving on to a question relating to quotas from Tom Morrow. You're now probably the only country in the world with a quota supply management system. Is it secure? Are there internal pressures to abolish? Are there external pressures from the USA to abolish? Has pressure from the USA diminished with the Biden presidency?
At the minute, it's secure. At the minute, there is legislation going through the Canadian Parliament. It's had its second reading to not actually take anything more away from its supply managed communities. So that's the poultry, eggs, and dairy. So those are all supply managed in Canada. So it's waiting to go for its third reading. So we're hopeful that will come through. I think they realize that at the minute we have 18% of our market that is filled by Europe, New Zealand, Australia, CPTPP countries. And then with the new CUSMA at the end of our 6 years, it'll take us to 18% market share. We actually increased our quota by 2% in the last few weeks. So I'm of the opinion that it is secure right now. I think it showed during the COVID crisis that we were actually able to manage our supply. As I said, we only lost a half a day's milk through the whole COVID crisis. We were able to put the brakes on pretty fast, and it really did show that it did what it said on the tin. And yes, there is pressure from the United States to abolish it. We suffered significant pressure whenever the new CUSMA deal was being negotiated. But I think right now COVID has taken over from CUSMA, and it's been very quiet now since Biden has come in as president. But maybe Rodney would be able to allude more as to what he hears on his side of the border.
Okay, question from John Henning. What bulls are you currently using?
Currently, we're using bulls from ST, a bull called Miami, a bull called Rapid, an older one called Cameo, and one called John Boy.
Okay.
Oh, and there's Ferdinand in the pen as well.
Right, okay. An anonymous question here. How much sand would you use for bedding cows, and is it easy to get enough?
It's easy to get enough sand. It's not easy to get enough of the right sand. So it's not every sand that's suitable. We actually have a good supply down here in Essex County, but there's not everywhere is as lucky. If you happen to get any clay into it at all, don't bother. That has to be like sand on the beach. It has to be like beach sand. So we actually have it, and William beds them once a week. So usually on a Saturday night or a Sunday night, he'll put the sand cart on, and when each group's milking, he'll go in, and there's a hump between the two stalls. So it's basically a 4-row barn. So it's 2 rows on each side, so head to head. And he goes in and fills that. And then as the week goes on, the kids pull it forward whenever they're raking. I love it because even in the summertime, it's cool. And we have a somatic cell that runs between 80 and 100. And really, it's the ideal bedding for cows. And you also give yourself a little bit of traction every time that cow stands up and steps into the alleyway. So yeah, sand bedding is probably for me a no-brainer now. I wouldn't go any other way.
Okay, thank you. In the interest of time, we'll have to make this the last question, an anonymous question. And this person would like you to answer. What would you say to a farmer from Northern Ireland considering making this move now?
Ooh, I would probably say you can't afford it. That's what I would say right now. Yesterday, I alluded to the executive team. We've recently heard of farms for sale in Ontario and in the more populated areas of Huron County and Perth County and Oxford. And if you were to take the farm and all the land and all the buildings and everything, and you were to put that cost across the number of kilos of quota that you're getting, those places are anywhere from $85,000 to $100,000 per kilo of quota. So it's absolutely ridiculous, the amount of quota that's actually being, the amount of money that's being put into quota. So I think right now it's unaffordable for most people. But if you're brave and if you have a will and you're hardworking, anybody can do this. Anybody can do this. It really is. And we have shown it's such a better lifestyle for us and the kids. Our kids stay kids for longer. And that was the main reason for us coming where we did, that we could do it together as a family.
Okay, thanks very much, Vicky. Could I thank those people that sent through questions and apologise to those people that didn't get an answer, but just unfortunately there's a few time constraints, but I think the number of questions is a barometer to the interest in your presentation, Vicky, and thank you very much. Now, I know you're staying with us, so there might be a few more questions at the very end.
And I'll take some answers too.
Yeah, and I'm very glad to report that our president is back with us, so I'll hand over to Charlie, the president, now.
Harold, and folks, apologies for my late arrival. Vicky, thanks for a great presentation. As usual, enthusiastic and very forward-looking and very optimistic. Thanks, Vicky, and I hope when we get back to talk a bit more about that later. Folks, our second speaker tonight is probably quite well known to folks, given a TV program that happened, I think, about 2006, I think it was, Rodney. Our second speaker is a well-known expat dairy farmer, Rodney Elliott. And Rodney hails from County Fermanagh. He sold his 200-acre, 150-cow dairy herd and moved his wife and 3 children to Lake Norden, South Dakota in 2006. The couple were able to buy 300 acres and build a unit for 1,500 cows within 6 months. The business has expanded since then to its present size of about 4,500 dairy cows and a farm staff of 50. They now grow their own crops and have a very good working relationship with neighbouring crop farmers who welcome the slurry from the Elliott farm. There's a very high standard of cow management on the farm, as well as has been very mindful of the environment. In recent years, robots have been introduced into their business. Rodney and his wife, Dorothy, have just been joined by their son in the business. I'm particularly interested, given my background in large-scale dairy farming, but I'll hand over to you, Rodney, to carry on from here, and then we'll go with the questions after that. Thanks, Rod.
Well, thank you very much, Charlie. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So it's a privilege and honour to be invited again to speak to the Ulster Grassland Society. I think I was home in 2012 and I presented to you then. And where did we start? Well, I grew up on a suckler cow farm. My dad had milk cows in his youth and I always wanted to milk cows. And I made an association between milking cows and being wealthy. And maybe that was a kind of a strange association to make, but that was the association I made. So my dad signed over 30 acres of land to me free and clear in 1982. And I went and I borrowed some money from the Ulster Bank and I started milking 25 cows in the 9th of April, 1982, almost 40 years ago. And of course, that wasn't maybe the greatest time to start up dairy farming in Northern Ireland because quotas were introduced 9 months later. And my original quota was 110,000 litres of milk that I was allowed to produce per year. By the time 2004 had come along, I had grown the herd to 140 cows because of the ability to purchase quota and rent quota. And last full year I milked cows in Northern Ireland. I produced 1 million litres of milk. But all those expansions over 22 years were very enjoyable, very satisfying. The next step that I wanted to make was going to be much more difficult financially for me to do. And it involved hiring people and building new facilities and stuff. And I never could actually make it pencil out on paper as the right thing to do. So I got restless and started looking for other places on earth to milk cows. And I ended up finding an ad that was in the local farm press for a couple of years saying wanted dairy farmers. And this strange place called South Dakota was looking for dairy farmers from all over the world. And I ended up coming on a study tour here in 2004, fell in love with the idea. We sold our farm in 2005. We moved our family in the very early days of 2006. And here we are. So next slide. Yep. And what actually happened was we followed a path that was building brand new dairies. Our industry was in need of investment in South Dakota. And there was very good background of people who had already done this. And we purchased a quarter ground, 160 acres of land without a building or a thing on it. And we started and we built the first Drumgoon dairy started in May and got in there in December to start milking cows. And that was to be the dream. It was going to be 1,400 dairy cows. We were following a path that others followed, using a custom calf raiser to raise our calves and heifers, and purchasing all of our feed requirements from local crop farmers. Even though we had some cropland, we actually rented it out. So the development of the farm, starting in 2006, that was quite a learning curve, getting used to milking cows in the States, and Vicky's point of how different it is, even though it's the same job. We struggled sometimes even knowing what we meant, or they've struggled even knowing what we meant by the names of some of the things we called things and what they called things, and it was quite a learning curve. But 2006, late last days of December, started milking cows. 2007 was a particularly good year to milk cows in the US, and by the time 2007 had rolled on, we already were overcrowding the barn. We had dry cows outside, which isn't ideal in this climate, and we had got into a good relationship with our lenders, our banks, and we were making some money, which was unusual for a startup dairy. And we then decided to do an expansion to go to 2,000 cows, which was our original permit. And we added those extra 500-600 cows on in the early parts of 2008, which was a great time to do it, because we got some money out of those cows before 2009, 2010 hit, which were some of the tougher years we milked cows. By the time 2010, the relationship with our calf raiser was not going very well. We had grown cow numbers. He hadn't grown his resources and his labor to help look after our calves and heifers, even though numbers were growing. And our death loss at that time was like 17% of the calves went there, never came home. So we made the decision to start and raise our own calves. We bought another farm about half a mile away from us, and we started to raise our own calves. And that had its own learning curve and its own problems. We actually started off with computerized or automated calf feeding systems, which was a bit of a disaster for us. And it took us a while to learn that we shouldn't have done that. And then we went into calf huts outside, and we learned how to raise calves pretty good. But 2012 saw us again in the same situation we found ourselves in 2007, 2008. We were now starting to house dry cows outside and having some tough weather with those and some tough results with those. And again, we looked at opportunity, and we decided to build another dairy on the exact same site on the 160 acres called Northern Dairy. And that was, the first half of that was built in 2013. Again, a free stall barn, cross-ventilated, very similar design to our original barn, but just some of the things we'd love to change in the original barn, we got a chance to change. So there was 1,100 cows moved in there. It took us to about 3,000 head of cows. That barn was always built with the view to be expanded to 2,500 cows. 2014, we made a large investment in heifer breeding facilities. As you grow cow numbers, more calves show up, more heifers show up. So we were now getting very spread out into 6 or 7 different locations all around the farm that we rented and owned, that we were raising heifers on. And so we invested and brought all the breeding heifers back home to the dairy site. 2015, the original plan to build the second half of Northern Barn to go to the 2,500 cow unit was a 5-year plan, but 2014 was about probably the best year we'll ever milk cows. From a financial point of view, our milk price probably in your money got up to somewhere close to what Vicky talks about, in excess of 40 cents a litre for a long period of time. And we made some really good money. So we decided to go right on ahead and build the second half of Northern Barn in 2015. That took us to about 4,500 cows. And around about that time, our lenders, and we work with Farm Credit Systems of America, which I think are the largest ag lenders now on earth, and they wanted to do an audit of our facility, and they came in and they give us some great praise on some of the things we were doing, but they were very critical of our heifer raising and our heifer development program, and how fragmented it was and how broken up it was. It was now, I think, in 9 different locations. and we were constantly moving animals backwards and forwards, and it was becoming quite unmanageable. And they suggested that we go and buy a feed yard and put everything together to get everything in the one spot. And we had a budget put together, and we spent quite a bit of time down south of us here in Nebraska, 3-4 hours south, where the climate's much better. And we looked at some lovely facilities, and we just were ready to buy. And then I decided I can't run things 5 hours away from home or 4 hours away from home. I don't think I can manage that. So we decided that we just moved some heifers down to a custom raiser in eastern Kansas, in a beautiful part of the world called the Flint Hills. And that went very well. We sent them down there at about 6 months of age, and they would send them back to us as bred heifers. And that freed us up a lot of room. We closed down 6 of the facilities we were renting and 1 facility we owned. And we turned it into a dry cow facility with 600 stalls for dry cows. And that allowed us to push the cow numbers in the milking barns up to about 4,900 cows in 2017. But that the relationships in Kansas developed, and we had some extremely tough winters here. And when we talk about tough winters, we'll cover it in another slide, in 2016, 2017. And we decided then to move all our calves and all our heifer raising down into southwest Kansas, almost on the Oklahoma, Colorado line, where we have a much better and arid desert type climate, and we do all our heifer raising down there. And that allowed us to grow the cow facilities here without having to grow the heifer facilities around them. We did a small parlour extension in 2019, took our double 36 milk and parlour here in Norden up to a double 30 up to double 36, added a couple of hundred cows that way, got us to 5,100 cows. And just last year, we built a third milking facility on the site, Drumgoon East, which is our first venture into robotic milking. And it's going to have, or it has 20 Delavalve V300 robots in there milking cows. Currently, we're milking in around 1150 there. We just started up 6 robots yesterday. But when that's up to full capacity, we believe we can milk about 6,400 cows on this site. Next. So we talked about one of the big decisions on the farm was 2017. We're milking 4,000 crossbred cows, mostly 500 dry cows. And the slide of the calf hutches was about 300 calf hutches we had set out 1 mile south of the dairy. And I took this picture standing on the top of 3 round bales one morning, I think the 19th of December. And the air temperature was minus 36 degrees centigrade. And on that particular day, we lost 33 calves, froze to death. And that was a big loss, of course. We had a lot of young baby calves that were just born from heifers, and they were very small little Jersey Cross calves. And we also lost a lot of people that winter. The people who we would send out to feed calves became totally disorientated and totally fed up with the whole calf raising system, and they would move on to other jobs. So we could never build a team. And I think it was that winter that was the decision we made to let's get rid of the calves. Let's get the calves down into Kansas. So this is an aerial photograph of the farm back in 2017. So Kansas dairy development, the opportunity came for us to become investors in it, and we're now at 15% ownership in Kansas dairy development. It was started in 2017 with the purchase of an existing feed yard and calf operation down in Deerfield, Kansas. Currently, and this number is out of date, I think we're currently closer to 58,000 head of dairy heifers we develop in there. We have 16,000 calf hutches, of which about 12,600 are constantly on milk. We have 38, 39, I think now, source farms where we bring in calves. Most of the calves come in there anywhere from 2 to 5 days of age. So we're bringing in about 250 calves a day. And there's 160 something odd employees there. And here's just some of the costs. It's not a cheap place to raise calves, but we actually end up with some really good calves coming out of there. So the first 180 days, what we call the calf ranch, we're billed at $2.75 a day. So it comes into about 495, and then from day 181 on to day 600, roughly we bring them home about day 600. There's an additional $1,000 of expense at 245 per day there. The only costs we would have in addition to that would be semen costs. So, you know, we take our costs of original semen, we take our transportation costs, we take our death loss, we take our animals that are do not breeds, and we come back to probably a overall replacement cost of in around $2,000 per animal. And the strange thing about all that is we have now purchased about 1,000 animals for the robotic barn, and they're probably averaging us in around 1,250 to buy some excellent quality cattle. So we're losing money in every heifer we raise. So 2021, where were we today? 6,000 milking cows. Well, 6,000 cows, probably 500, 600 dry cows. 54 employees. It goes up and down every day. So we're not really sure if it's 54 today or not. The new 1,500 cow robotic barn. These photographs were taken during construction in October. It's now functioning. I think we've got a lot of capacity to add to that barn. We're at 1,150 right now. We think we'll get to 1,400. We think we'll get to 1,500 milking cows in there. Production per cow is about 10,700 litres per cow per year. We're milking a crossbred cow. Our milk in this area all goes from manufacturing, and everyone talks about COVID and the milk problems, and you saw all the milk that was dumped in the US. Our milk all goes to a mozzarella cheese plant, and they couldn't get enough milk right through the COVID. When people were housed at home, people liked pizza, and people couldn't get enough pizza, and we were being told, produce more milk, produce more milk, produce more milk. So 3.5% protein, and a somatic cell count between the three barns, 170. With the robotic barn, I think that has dropped quite a little bit. The robotic barn's about 110. So the philosophy of the farm, big believer in what is called our social license to operate. When you become large in an area, and this is a fairly remote agricultural area, you tie a big target on your back. So you have to operate within a social license, and that means you have to be a good neighbor to everybody, and you have to be a good part of the local community and the local society. And we also have to pay attention to the small details. So keep the place tidy, and you know, if I'm driving down the highway and I see something that may or may not have blown out of one of our vehicles going up and down the road, I will make sure and stop and get out and pick it up, because I don't want to give anyone any reason to not want our dairy here. Reduced antibiotic use. We are now into our third year, just started in March, of no antibiotics on lactating cows. And that was a decision we made based on the risk and an assessment and an audit I conducted of how much antibiotic we're using, who's using it, what are the problems, what's the risk of losing a tanker load of milk or having a cow go for slaughter that is contaminated with antibiotics. And it's been amazing the results we've seen with that. So lowering costs, of course, that's always a philosophy on the farm. You know, we live in a market where we're dictated by the forces of commodity, and most commodities on earth are produced, or the cost of most commodities will eventually come back to the cost of production. So our only way to stay relevant and to be profitable is to be below the average cost of production. So we always must emphasize on lowering costs. More emphasis on cow comfort. Back to Vicky's statements on sand. We're over 6,000 stalls, all bedded with sand. So sand is the gold standard. It's something that we love. We're actually lucky enough that we own a gravel sand pit as well, which means we're our own customer. And it's great. We recycle all our sand and reuse it again and again. And you know, we've lots and lots of cows, lots and lots of people moving cows every day. I rarely, if ever, see a cow split or down because she's split, you know. And again, the strict adherence to pay scale. That's something that's when you have 55 employees and turnovers at sometimes of over 100% per year. We were constantly being the gun put to our head. If you don't pay me more money, I'm leaving, right? Or if you can't give me another $1 an hour, I've got a job somewhere else will give me the $1 an hour. And in desperation, I sought some advice from some dairy friends of mine down in Panhandle of Texas that milk a lot of cows and have over 400 employees. And they explained to me their very stringent, straightforward, simple pay scale. And once we implemented that, it basically means everybody on the farm has got one of 5 scales, A, B, C, D, and E. And they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of experience. And that puts everybody into one of 25 boxes. And in that box is a number. And if you don't like that number, then you can just leave, you know? And we've found so far that that has worked very, very well. So we've got a lot of long-serving team members, but a lot of high turnover. Collective experience, you know. I believe strongly that we have board meetings here or management meetings every Monday. And I think if I am not the dumbest guy in that room, I probably haven't hired the right people to be around me. So we hire good people and give them a lot of responsibility, and they try very well. Maximum times on in the milking parlor. Our goal is to milk in our milking parlors is to milk 1,000 cows per labour unit per day. So for that to happen, the cows have to be milked quickly, they have to be clean, and they have to be milked quickly. The other philosophy on the farm is we've built a lot of walkways, and we don't walk cows between, or we don't haul cows between facilities. We walk cows where we can. Thanks. Next, okay, diets. So bi-weekly meetings with our nutritionist team. They come on the farm. They're continuously sampling our products. My son David does a lot more work on the diets than I do. Feed management software, an absolute must. Whether you're a large dairy or a small dairy, you cannot guess what you're putting in a mixer wagon. You have to record it. You have to use computers for all this stuff. Consistent delivery, that's one thing we're very, very proud of. We have a wonderful feeding team, and they know that they're expected to drop feed in front of pen 15 at 10:05 in the morning, and it will be within 5 minutes of that every morning. 325 tons of feed delivered daily, probably more than that since we've added more cows. The way back feed, that's the feed that the cows don't eat today, will be used in later lactation cows. It'll be used in some heifer rations, or it'll be sold to some beef farmers beside us. So nothing goes to waste. And then strict adherence to push-ups. Every 3 hours, we're pushing up. Feed every 2 hours in the night time. And I think we've over 2 miles of feed line to push up. So a lot of work just keeping feed pushed up. And there's some of the diets we have there. My glasses, I might be fit to see it. So cottonseed, high grain mix, which is a lot of corn, soybean products, and distillers products. Micronutrients, we have a micro machine on the farm to add micronutrients. Our alfalfa is made as haylage, so really high protein, good feed for cows. Maize silage, corn silage, whey, and things like that. Kathy? Probably sent it to put on battery. Oh, I don't know. Before the battery runs out. Next.
I don't have a charger for you.
Farming. So we bought originally 160 acres. We've had several opportunities to buy bits and pieces of land right now. So as of today, we probably own 1,440 acres. We rent about 150 acres that's adjacent to us. And on that, it's not all tillage or cropland. We can grow about 700 acres of maize every year. This year, we might push that to about 750, and about 400 acres of alfalfa. Again, we will harvest that 4, possibly even 5 times. In addition to that, there'll be a couple of thousand acres of corn silage purchased every year. Of course, the byproduct of all that is 60, 70 million gallons of dairy manure. And that we will put on the 11,000 acres of land that is in our nutrient management plan. That's neighboring land that's owned by other crop farmers. And they will have access, we have access to put the manure on that. So the management, Right. The management of the farm, maybe look it up on the other computer in case this one goes dead, David.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can we use this?
And the management of the farm is myself and my wife. My wife is head of human resources, which is a huge part of it. And David, our son, who's back on the farm now 7 years, who is our operations manager. And then we're very lucky to have met Andy Webber. Andy was a young guy who we bought his herd of cows out. He had tried milking cows on his own, got to about 100 cows and found that he couldn't do it on his own. And he was willing to sell his cows, come to work with us. We bought his cows. Jose Rivera, one of my main guys who's been with me now for 14 years, head of maintenance repair. He's kind of the brains behind the operation. Kathy Verhoek, again, we bought Kathy's cows probably 12, 13 years ago more. And Kathy just came along with the cows and she's been here since.
I need your ID to get it set up.
Yeah.
And that's our management team. We are strong believers in what's called lean management. And that is discipline. It means that every week we have weekly management meetings. We have monthly department meetings. And then every department has their own weekly meetings. So the calf team, the maternity team, the milking team, the operations team, the maintenance guys, all will have their meetings. We do a lot of work on profiling of people. So we did Clifton strength training, which we spent a lot of time and money on. We did a lot on disc profiling of our team to understand how we all think and how we all work. And then my goal as a boss is to keep stepping back from the jobs and to give the employees the tools and the skills and the trades, to the time to do their job correctly, and then just to let them get on with it. Yeah. And we got the battery going again now. We're in good shape. And a great trust in employees. And then, of course, there's a great team of outside consultants. We have a management consultancy team that come in and meet with us every 2 weeks. And then we have weekly phone calls with them. And then we have a financial consultant who prepares a lot of budgets and accrual accountancy and works with us on big projects like the robot barn to help us present it to our lenders in a form that they can understand. And then, of course, relationships with our stakeholders, with our banks and with our local community and with our county management boards and so on and so forth. So very important that we keep relationships open. Recruitment, this is where it gets interesting. Last year on the farm, we're talking about 2020, we had 10 different nationalities working on the farm. Where do we find these people? Is often a good question. We're using a lot of J1 visas, which are student visas. We've had some people from Northern Ireland work with us from those. We've 2 people coming from Argentina next week at the end of the month. We have TN2 visas, which is a relationship between Canada, America, and the US, which allows professionals to work in any of those environments or any of those areas. And we recruit internally. So we will have our employees recommend us as a good employer to other employees. We recruit online. We've actually recruited quite a few people through our Facebook page and Indeed. And today we're very proud of the fact that our turnover is 40%. In 2016, it was 150%. And at that stage, it's very, very hard to manage. A couple of things we did to improve the turnover is we have staff housing on site. So we can house about 40 people, 35, 40 people on site, which is great because now TN visas come here without any car or anything. They can walk to and from work. And then we try to, and we need to do better. We try to do more training and onboarding. So animal movement, animal safety, welfare, your understanding protocols, even sometimes reading and writing. We have to work with people to make sure that they can understand reading and writing. So we have 3 full-time staff working on human resources. That would be myself, my wife, and our office manager, Fernando, helping. So milking. We're milking in the northern barn here where all our fresh cows are and all our calving happens in a double 36 parallel I-90 parlour that we expanded in 2019. That's 4 full-time milkers. They're milking about 7,000 cows per day, probably a little more than that right now, and producing about 200,000 pounds of milk. So 90,000 litres of milk per day produced in Northern Barn. In Drumgoon, the original parlour, we have a double 24 Gia parlour, pretty similar parlour, a little bit different fast exit stalls that we put in there when the other ones wore out. And these Turner stalls we really like. We run 3 milkers in there, and ironically, I think of the milking team there, it's nearly all females. We're probably 18 of our staff are females, maybe more. And these are really good girls to milk cows. Again, there's no fresh calved heifers, there's no fresh cows down there. It's all late lactation, do not breed cows. And they're probably milking about 6,000 cows. They will easily achieve 1,000 cows per person per shift. And they milk about 120,000 pounds of milk a day down there, so 50,000 pounds. And now we're also milking the robot barn. The breeding, 100% AI, has been 100% AI here for 5-6 years now, no bulls. Alta Genetics are contracted for all our breeding. So they provide the technicians, the supplies, the semen, and they have their staff on the farm 7 days a week to do the breeding. All the heifers in Kansas, where we breed in-house with our breeding team in Kansas, are bred 3 times 6 dairy semen, and then 2 times Angus, and then we just make the decision to cull that heifer. 10% of our first lactation cows here are bred 6 dairy, depending on the flow of heifers. So the flow of heifers has been very good this last few months, and I don't know if we've used a straw dairy semen on the farm here for 4 or 5 months. It's nearly been all Angus. The remainder of our cows are all, as I say, bred Angus. The Dairy Council Reproduction Award, we were nominated and won a gold award. This is an award that's run by Horde's Dairy magazine with an annual preg rate of 35%, which is really a very, very high rate. So 50+% conception rate on all breeding here, even though we use a lot of sex semen. And we're great believers in crossbreeding cows. You can see some of the cows here in the little video. So these are a crossbred cow. There's a mixture of Holstein Jersey crosses. Some of them cross back to Swedish Red, some Swedish Red cross back on some Holstein. And we try to follow a 3-way rotational cross. Expansions like we're doing right now, it's very difficult to get these quality cross cows purchased. So we end up tending to buy a lot of straight Holstein cows, and then we'll cross them and breed them the way we would like to breed them ourselves. And of course, a goal for us is to achieve more lactations per cow. We're currently at a 2.3 average lactations on the herd. If we can take that to 2.5, 2.8 even, it will be a huge financial benefit to us. And you can see the Angus cross calves in the top picture. Those would be calves of our own that we sent to Kansas to raise for beef. And it was an exercise in a learning exercise. I don't think it was a very profitable exercise. We sent 1,500 down there, and we're much better actually just to sell them as day-olds, 2-day-olds. Next. Costs. And so 2020, what a year, you know. Our average price for milk was $20.68, which is what, 33 pence per litre. The exchange rate has changed a little bit since I did this slide, probably more like 31, 32 if you did it today. 41 euro cents per litre. So very, very strong milk price year for us. But it wasn't a straightforward year. Our milk price in May was $12.75 per hundredweight. We need 17, 16.50 to make the ship sail. So we were losing our shirt in May. And a little 2 months later, it was $27, almost over double the price. So we went from the lows to the highs. And I just broke expenditure down by percentage of receipt, you know. So 47% of everything we bring in goes back on feed. We don't, even though we farm a couple of or 1,000 acres of land ourselves, we run that as a separate business. We sell that feed at the same price as we would buy it off other farms back to the dairy. So that's our true cost of feed. Replacements are going to cost us 14.6% for replacements. Labor runs at about $12, or sorry, about 10%. So about a third of a penny per litre, pretty efficient on labour. And then that gives us about 16, 17% to cover others. So that would be profit and interest, principal and interest, all the other costs and bits and pieces. So as I say, our break even would be probably in around that 25 pence a litre. You know, selling Angus bull calves right now, very easy to sell them. They're good calves. We do a good job of raising calves. $200 per head, and these calves are going out at 1, 2, 3 days of age. And then, of course, we talk about the good year that 2020 was. In addition to a good milk price, we had some really good government assistance coming in the form of a CFAP program, and there was 2 CFAP programs. There was a payroll protection program. There was a economic disaster loan program that came in, and the farm would have benefited in excess of $1 million from government assistance through COVID. Here's just a picture of drag lining some manure, and we use custom operators to do that, and some custom harvesters to chop all the corn silage, crop about 3,000 acres corn silage a year. Next, if we have one. So we've done costs, we've done goals. Oh, sorry, goals. The goals: robot barn milking in 2021. Yes, we started up. It was 20 robots. We obviously couldn't start 20 robots up in one day. So 18th of January was the first startup. 6 robots. We learned how to do the startups from there on in. We then did another startup on the 1st of February. We learned a little bit from that. We've done a startup on the 18th of March. We got really good at that one, and we just did a startup yesterday morning. So we added 190 something cows to the barn yesterday morning, started up 6 more robots. 1,500 cows, goal to run it with 4 labour units, maximising existing equipment and team. I think we could actually run it with 3 full-time labour units out there. A daytime, a night guy, time guy, and a guy that runs the middle of the day shift from midday to midnight. Our people like 12-hour shifts. Those people won't breed a cow, won't feed a cow, won't move a cow, won't vaccinate a cow. If the manure system breaks, somebody else will come in and fix it. They'll just be purely cow people and cleanup people. Cost per stall, $8,000, £5,000 per cow space. Yeah, I think we can get there. I think our through costs about 8,200 because we took the brakes off and did it a little bit nicer than we anticipated. 75 cows per robot was the goal that I set Deal Val. And we have pens right now milking 76 cows per robot, and I believe we can do 75. I would challenge that we possibly can do a little bit more. Another goal on the farm is to keep debt under $3,000 per cow. That was a goal when we started 15 years ago, and we managed to achieve it then. We still are fit to achieve it today, but of course we have more cows, so we have more debt. And then 2021, we have signed contracts to build an anaerobic digester for all the dairy manure on the farm. That is somewhere where we get paid a royalty per cow per year. So we just basically rent the cow to the digester plant. We have a small distribution of profit. 3% of their gross revenue will come back to us, and we have a 20-year buyout clause. If we want to, we can buy it from them at an agreed price in 20 years. I don't know whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. I don't know if anyone wants a 20-year-old anaerobic digester. And then, I guess, to remain viable, we must stay below the average cost of production, or we'll get eaten up. Even though we're a very large dairy farm, there are much larger dairy farms in this area that will continue to drive the cost of production even lower than we can, and that gives them an edge to grow and steal more of the market share than we can do. And then continuous reinvestment in the business. We haven't sat still since we came here, and we can't afford to, and we don't intend to. Next, if we have one. Questions. There we go. How do we do for time? About right.
Rodney, we're in good time. We've plenty of time for questions. Thanks again for a very, as I say, inspiring talk. And it just shows you what we can do. But before we go on to the questions, there's a few things just in my mind. So I've had experience with large cow dairy management, and one of the key things that I learned was the importance of dry matter intake. And maybe you want to enlarge on that. What would you target your cows to go to in dry matter intake towards peak yield, if you like, Rodney?
So yeah, well, of course,
Yeah.
to Vicky's point, our feeds are extremely dry. You know, we have we'll put up corn silage here, 38% dry matter is our goal, 38% dry matter. Haylage we like to get to 42, 44, 45 even dry matter. But just got David to throw me up some sheets here in front of us. 55 pounds of dry matter intake on the farm, that's 23 to 25 kilos.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. Okay.
And we have a smaller cow. Our cow probably is a 550 kilo cow.
Okay. And I suppose the other thing is your dry cow management. Could you it's probably the most important part of the year. Mm-hmm. Is there anything different you do there that we could learn from, Rodney?
Yeah. So we go for a 56-day dry off period. We dry off strictly. Of course, everyone's 100% AI. So we have very good dates on our calvings. Tuesdays are dry off day. And we built our dry cow facility 600 stalls, and it's in 6 100 cow pens. And so we keep each week's dry off cows separate from the week before, the week after, right? Which is great when it comes to time to sort and move cows. We just basically move the whole pen back to maternity area.
Okay.
And so that's one thing. And then decad diets to get the blood urea level in the cow stable. So we do a lot of work on decad diets and urine pHs on cows. We have those tested every week.
Okay. Right, Rodney, I'm just going to start off. It's the first question we have here is anonymous and 10D. Any drawbacks with the crossbred cows?
Yeah, I think lack of uniformity. The cows tend to be a little up and down in size. We know that sand bedding is all forgiving. So sand bedding can accommodate a 1,800 pound Holstein cow. It can accommodate an 800 pound Jersey cow. We notice a little bit with the robots that 800 pound Jersey cow, even though she's aggressive and she wants to get in there, it tends to leave a little bit too much room for another cow to get into the shoulders behind her. And then we have to play the gate game for a little while, which loses us capacity in the robots. So I would say that is one of the things. We are actually now breeding a lot of cows to what we call XD bulls, which are crossbred bulls. And they're basically a composite breed bull that is designed around the traits that we need for milk production. Yeah. But otherwise, we just love the cows. Their ability to live in large numbers, their ability to breed back, their ability to live on concrete with a little small hard black hoof. They're an amazing creature.
Okay. The next one, one of your slides, which I was very impressed with, Rodney, was the philosophy, the social license, which I am very impressed with, and that sort of brings back the public perception, the importance of animal welfare, and obviously staff management. But the next question probably leads into that from Jim Freeburn. How important is community involvement in your operation? And that probably comes back to that.
Well, community involvement is, of course, very, very important. So, we're great to support the school backpack program, the local clubs and associations, the people who want to hunt our land, the people who need a help up in life. We will help those people. It's an ag community, so ag is very strong in this area, and as farmers, you're appreciated. But I think we will always be, well, my generation, my wife and I will always be viewed as outsiders. So that as itself presents a little bit of problems.
Okay. I just see underneath that question, Jason, did you want to come in on that question, Jason? No, just Jason, you wanted to answer that.
No, it's just me taking it off. Don't worry.
Okay, all right. Right. The next question is from another anonymous. What 3 factors, or can you name 3 factors, either negative or positive, that have had an operation and the biggest effect on your operation since you arrived in America, basically?
Three factors now.
Yeah. That's maybe.
So I'm actually a big believer that this work we've done on strengths training and our management philosophy and getting a team involvement in this. You know, for the first 8-10 years we ran this farm as Rodney went to bed at night, Rodney had a dream, Rodney got up the next morning and started building a new barn, right? And that must be very frustrating to work for Rodney. You know, now these things get discussed and talked over and budgets get looked at a group level, and everybody's opinion is taken in and considered. And we understand, because we've all worked together as a team for a while, that you know, maybe the most vocal person in the room, which would probably be myself, is probably the one that should say the least and do the most listening, you know, and the people who are quietest should we listen to. So that has been a great thing, and that all comes from having brought in our management consultants who made us sit down and actually take the discipline to do these. And like Monday morning, you can imagine Monday morning on a 6,000 dairy cow farm, we're starting up robots, we're pumping manure, we're doing field work, we've got concrete guys putting down concrete here, we've got teams of people pouring concrete, we're moving in onto the new robots. We still take our 10:30 management meeting and we did it, you know, and so it has to be discipline, you know. Okay. Negatives, I'd say negatives are not owning up to your own failures quick enough. You know, I look back to our time, we spent 6 years working through a $250,000 investment in an automated calf feeding barn to realize that we cannot raise cows with automatic calf feeders, right? And we had tried everything. We put in heated concrete floors and changed air ventilation and automatic curtains and redone the bedding and redid everything and sterilized everything, and we still can't raise calves with automated calf feeders, right? So, and when I said to my employees, I'm taking them out and you're going to have to carry the bottles to the calf hutches and feed the calves in calf hutches, they just hugged me and kissed me because they hated the barn, because they hated dealing with sick and dead calves all the time, you know? So being big enough to admit that you're wrong, I think, is another very important skill. Yeah. Okay,
the next one relates to fertility. Probably do you synchronize your cows for first service?
Yeah, we have a voluntary waiting period here of 70 days. And so all cows start on what's called an off-sync program. And that means we give them an estimate or a prostaglandin shot on day 70. But every cow on the farm and has activity monitors, collars. And so then we start breeding off activity as soon as we see activity. So when we look at our pregnancies, I think only 7% of our pregnancies are achieved through what we would call timed AI. So cows that actually finish the back end of a double off-sync program. So we're cherry picking all the way along.
Okay. Next question probably comes back to something we were talking about, Vicky, earlier. What impact will the Biden presidency have on agricultural policy compared to the previous incumbent?
So I know Donald Trump received a terrible press globally, but Donald Trump actually was a very good president to be a dairy farmer under, right? And the biggest fear I have as a businessman here is that we are going to have to succumb to some extreme regulatory pressure going forward, you know? And one thing Donald Trump did was he eliminated a lot of unnecessary regulatory pressures, you know? So we go back to our Water Act here, where under Obama, if water lay on a field for more than a couple of days and was noticed, that then fell under the realm of navigable water, couldn't be drained, couldn't be tiled, couldn't be moved, couldn't be anything done with, you know? And so you had people planting around areas and fields that were actually very farmable, but weren't allowed to. The EPA under Donald Trump allowed us to do away with some of those unnecessary ones. And I fear they're all going to come back again to haunt us. Yep. But, you know, exports will be what dairy industry, beef industry, certainly the grain industry in the US relies strongly on exports. We're really at the mercy of currency exchange. We're at the mercy of other countries been fit to buy our products. We're no different than Northern Ireland.
Next question from David Porter. What do you see as the ideal herd size before you can't significantly reduce costs any further? And that's, I know where they're coming from. There comes a stage where you've got a significant investment and your costs go up. You know, I know, yeah.
So what we try to do here is, again, to stay relevant, is we try to dilute our overheads by as many cows or as many liters of milk or many pounds of milk as we can, same as we've always done. But the US falls into some certain sizes that actually work. You know, the 700 cow farm is a minimum, I believe, in the upper Midwest, because you have to be relevant. You have to be selling a full truckload of milk every day, right? That's probably step number one. At 1,500 cows when we started, you as owner can have time to manage. You can afford to pay a full-time feeder, probably a full-time herds person, and a milking team as such. The next logical stepping stone there, everybody seems to think, is about that 4,000 cows. At that time, you have a feeding team, you have a herd team, you have a calf raising team. So when you start to look at 50 employees or 54 employees, and right now there's probably 27 people working on the farm, for me, if somebody shows up sick today, I can absorb that. Right? Yeah. For Vicky, if somebody shows up sick today, she's doing the work, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, and that's where a difference. And now we start to see the Riverviews of this world. They've realized that 10,000 cows is a sweet spot. You know, they can now justify having a full team of people at that level. So where's the ultimate efficiency? For us, we are now starting to see that we have to haul feed from further afield. We're having to pump manure a little bit further than we used to, but it's still better than being broken up into 2 or 3 locations, I think.
Vicky, do you want to pass comment on that, Vicky, just on your side of things in Ontario?
You know, so what
size of a herd would you go to before you're significant increased your overheads? Basically, what size can you handle in your present system? You know.
The overheads here are dictated by the amount of quota that you can hold. Yeah, and the largest farms in Ontario are actually sitting at around the 1,000 kilo marks right now. Yeah. There's one farm that's at a slightly higher level and more along the lines of the American route, more along Rodney's lines with, you know, immigrant labor and those sorts of things. So those are things that really the greenhouse operations over with us are the only ones that are utilizing that. Yeah. For us, we have 1 full-time person and 3 part-time guys, but like William and Scott and I do a fair bit of the work here ourselves, and Jane feeds the calves at night. So I think if you have a family that's willing to put the hours in, yeah, we're probably at the sweet spot right now for the minimum number of staff that we have. But if you can get up to that 500-600 cow level, then you can afford to put more employees in there. And I think that's, you know, as Rodney says, that 700 cow mark, that's where you can become a manager. But I think that's a choice you make in Ontario, whether you want to become a person manager or you want to stay as a manager of the black and whites.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Vicky. John Henning, we're sort of coming back. John says, fantastic story, Rodney. We all agree with that. If you were starting again, what, if anything, would you do differently, Rodney?
Well, when I went to America, I was 41 years old. The day I arrived in America, I probably would have came when I was a little younger, right?
I think what a lot of us could agree with that, yes.
Yeah, because, you know, and then I think I've told this story many times, you know, I had lots of opportunity for 4 months, 5 months when we arrived here before we started construction. We had no loyalty to any bank. We went to several different banks and presented our business plan, and it was accepted by them all. And it was a fairly strong business plan in hindsight, and that was around 800-900 cows. And then we went and meet a bank manager, and he was the first one to say, no, I will not lend you $1 million to start a business, but I will lend you 3. Huh? And he says, you're stupid to think you can start at 900 cows and be successful. You need to be thinking of 1,500 cows, you know? And that probably was the best advice I got in America. Yeah. Okay. You know, if you're going to do it, do it. And we'd had to learn. It was, it was a huge learning curve, still is. We talked about 10 different nationalities in the farm. We'd like 7 different languages in the farm. We run the farm with a WhatsApp group and with Translate on everybody's phone, and that's how we run the farm, right?
Yeah. Okay. The next question, Trevor Alcorn. Why the Delaval robots and not GEA, as the rest of your milking equipment is GEA?
I'm sitting beside the Delaval rep that sold me the robot, so I have to be very careful what I say. I believe, as of today, that the Delaval V300 is the best robot that there is to milk cows. I'm not saying, a bit like your cell phone, that the next generation of Lely or the next generation of Gia robots won't be better, But today, I think that they're the best robot to milk a cow.
Okay, very diplomatic. Right, next one. Alan McElmoyle, Rodney, you indicated that cows, this is a problem we had in Saudi, actually. Cows are lasting an average 2.3 lactations. Can you break down the reasons for the culls? Is it lameness, infertility, mastitis, etc.?
Well, it's not mastitis and it's not lameness, and I don't think it's infertility. I think it's we have a fairly strict policy. We have a 50-50 policy on the farm. If you're not producing 50 pounds of milk by the day or 50 days of milk, we're not keeping you, right? You can go somewhere else, right? Yeah. And then I think the large facilities, the large pens tend to break too many cows. I think we've got too many cows that end up not being spotted quick enough or not being treated correctly. And probably overcrowding is something that we're all guilty of in the dairy industry, and it tends to have consequences. I think we're not alone in that 2.3 lactations. I think there's farms, certainly in California, that wouldn't even claim to be at 2, right? And when we had BST in the US, there's a lot of farms that say, why would you ever want to be anything other than a 2 lactation herd, So, and we tend to want to keep our heifers because we think they're the best genetics we have. So we keep them and we cull off cows, maybe that we don't need to.
Next question is probably one I'd like to ask you myself. Are there still opportunities from people from Northern Ireland to move to South Dakota? And what size would be available?
Well, I think the great opportunities are for people to work. These farms are crying out for people to come in and help manage and run them, right? I talked about our operation in Kansas that we have, and we went out and headhunted, or we knew of a girl and we went out and we found her. And her starting salary in Ulster was in excess of $250,000 a year, plus a golden handshake to get her to come and work for us, plus a free truck and a free house, right? And she's good and she's worth every penny of it, right? But like if somebody has the ability and the vision to come in and run or help run these farms, we have lots and lots of farms that are crying out not for employees, but somebody with vision, somebody with personality, somebody with good communication skills to come in and help manage people. And there also is lots of opportunity, and I imagine in Canada the same, for somebody like that to come in and buy into a farm, use sweat labor, sweat equity to get their foothold in the industry. And I would recommend that to young guys that really want to get involved in this industry here. Again, it's a math thing. Vicky's saying that you got to produce X amount of kilos of milk or kilos of fat today. We have to, in the US, to be taken seriously by a milk buyer or taken seriously by a bank, you need to be milking 750 cows, because that's a full load of milk in a day, or 700 cows, or at least have a clear pathway to where you're going to get there quickly.
Okay. Folks, I see time going on. If you're happy enough to with a few more questions, we'll go for a couple more anyway, if you're okay with that. Yeah. Mark Blaylock, how do you manage without antibiotics in the lactating cow? I think you passed comment on that. Yeah, you cut. Yeah. How do you do that?
So it wasn't by design we went this way. All our cows that leave the farm are tested for antibiotics at the slaughter plants. And we sent a cow out in the February of 2019, 18. And in spite of our very strict records and good record keeping, we realized that this cow, in spite of being 3 days over her withdrawal limits for exceed, she tested positive in the slaughter plant. And then all hell breaks loose. The USDA fall on you like a ton of bricks, and you get visitations and you got to answer questions and you go through your records and they go through your computer and your dairy comp records and they dig a case and actually they come back and they said, you know, this is very well organized, very well run farm, but you're still under 1 year's probation, right? Which means if you have a second offense in that year, right, then it becomes a matter of public record. So then the consumer in Walmart can look up on a website and say, I sure as hell don't want to buy any cheese that comes from these 3 farms that are on this list of being continuous bad players on antibiotics. And our cheese plant then could lift the phone and say, well, we can't take your milk anymore. You can do what you want with it. So really it was a choice. At that stage, I was disappointed that it happened. And then we dug into the audit on how we were managing with antibiotics. And we realized 20% of the antibiotics we were buying, we had no idea where they went, you know? So were the people oversubscribing? Were they not recording? Were they stealing it? I have no idea, right? The other thing that scared the heck out of me was that we had 7 people on the farm who were administrating antibiotics, right? You know, with the best will in the world, people get busy. They've got 10 cows to treat. They'll treat the 10 cows. They wrote down 9 numbers. They can't read the last number of who was she, right? You know, and then, so there's a lot of sleepless nights worrying about that. And we never lost a load of milk. In 40 years, I've never lost a load of milk to antibiotics. I have to be proud of that fact, right? So following some of the other farms in this area that are even larger than we are, and I went and talked to one of my friends and I said, how do you manage? And he says, we just quit it. He says, we just quit it cold turkey. Just get off it. You don't need it. Just, but that saving to us was about $800 a day, right? And at that level, you have to say, well, do I want to put that $800 in my pocket, or do I want to start and spend some of that money on making sure that my cow comfort, my cow's environment, my feed, my management, my cleanliness and tidiness and attention to detail is always top notch? So that's what we did, right? We decided to up our levels and make sure everything was done right. And our death loss was 3.2 for the year before. Our death loss is 3.1, right? Our cull rate was 32. Our cull rate is still 32, 33, you know. Somatic cell count went down, you know, believe it or not, because we're not messing around. I strongly believe by the time we found a mastitis, because we weren't milking the cows, the time we found a mastitis and treated it, it was almost inevitable that that cow would be reoccurring mastitis fairly quickly again, you know. So now if she doesn't, and a lot of 70% of mastitis will clear up themselves just by milking them, right? So we just milk our way through it. That's what the people are trained to do. And eventually if the cow doesn't program that, we cull the cow. So all our drugs reps came out here and said, it'll be a disaster. Wait till you see, if you don't clean up the metritis and those first lactation heifers, you'll never get them in calf. Our fertility rates shot up, right? We won an award for the best breedings. So I don't think it's for everybody. I think crossbreeding cows helps, that we have a little bit of inbuilt vigor in the cow. I think our diets have to be important. We have to have a strong diet, so we're not putting overly much pressure on the cow to produce milk, but we're still doing 10,700 litres. And I don't miss antibiotics one bit. In fact, we're only doing probably 30% of the cows that get dried off get any antibiotics now. A lot of them don't. And I think in the future, we're not going to be able to.
One more on the list here. Stephen Watterson. Rodney, going forward, do you see the farm going 100% robotic milking? And what was your main drive to go down the robot route? Well, you sort of told us that, but do you want to recap on that?
So my main drive was actually very different than most. My main drive to go down the robotic route was I wanted to show on this farm there was a clear career pathway for the people that were standing in the milking parlour, that I need very much, the young guys that come to me here to stand in the milking parlour, that if they stay with us, there is a clear career pathway to a better job or a higher paid job. And our goal on the farm today is not to create any more jobs in the farm that don't pay $20 an hour, right? I do not want the people that the factories in town won't take on my farm. I want them taking the people that I won't take, right? So that's the goal of the farm, you know, to get into a better, more educated, higher class of employee. And that's going to be a tough challenge, but to use the robotics as a magnet to attract these younger, brighter, more intelligent, more technologically gifted people. And the people we have out there that we chose and put on that team, they have been really, really successful. And every day I step further and further away from that barn and let the people get on with running it.
And Rodney, that's the last of our formal questions. I maybe have a couple more for you because I'm on it here. You alluded on average cost of production. Can I ask you that one, Rodney?
Yeah.
You know, you told me what you're getting. We've got your breakdown, but the average for that area, I'm not asking what yours are. What do you expect to do it for?
The cost of production.
Yeah.
So we measure everything, which would include like our salaries and our health insurance and our own vehicles and everything like that there. We would need $16.50 would be break even, right?
Yeah.
But that is included in that is taxation and principal and interest and everything like that there. Now, for the farm to survive, we could survive on a $14.50 milk price for a long time, because we would then be using depreciation as an asset, right? You know, right now we're taking depreciation as a cost, right? So there has been periods of time since we came here that we have been producing milk for lower than the cost of production. Those periods of time usually last 6 to 9 months, and they're horrible and they're painful. And you get up every morning and your goal is, how little money can I lose today rather than can I make any money, right? And it goes on and on, but it corrects itself. You know, farms go out of business, people decide to cull cows because they have to pay bills, production falls and milk price rise, and it always follows back up again. So you're in it for the long haul, I think, is the answer.
Great. Ronnie, it's 10 o'clock. I think for everybody, so when we draw this to a close, listen, both of you, I really appreciate this opportunity, and that's what COVID has brought us, the opportunity to go further afield. Normally we'd have a spring walk somewhere in Northern Ireland tonight, but probably the coronavirus allowed us to get to see a lot wider, inspired by what you guys are doing. Certainly, I said, go back to that slide. I really appreciate the one about your philosophy. Rodney, the way that you're managing people inspires me, because that's the key to this operation. Motivation through training, keeping people there, and delegation is a big thing to do that, and putting trust in people.
But it's the only way you can grow is if you grow your team, you know?
Yeah. Look, and Vicky, I have to take my hat off, obviously, to both of you, but Vicky, here, what, 16 years ago, you have developed a terrific farm. You've really put top-class technology. I must be impressed by the 11,500 kilograms from 2 tons of feed. That's something that's excellent. And through, I'd say, hard work, prudent financial management, tenacity, vision, and tremendous energy, probably both of you, to do that. And I'm getting itchy feet again myself. I've traveled overseas and want to see. I got a feeling to go back and have another look round. But
I'll just pick up actually, Charlie, on something that that Rodney said too. That you have to learn by your mistakes, and I think Rodney and I have we've all made mistakes. There's all things we wouldn't have done again, but you know, I think we've all done this by taking our mistakes and turning them into stepping stones instead of actually making them a barrier. And I think that's something that all people can learn from.
Well, look, thank to both speakers, you know, for your time taken to prepare and deliver 2 very informative and inspiring and thought-provoking papers. I wish we could have way, but we can't do it again, both of you. And I wouldn't mind getting thanks. I just a few other thanks. You know, I'd like to thank Jason Rankin tonight. the General Manager of Ag Research. He's really helped us set up and managing the whole webinar technology. As you know, we had a conference in late February, which ran really well, and this has followed on from that. Thanks to George Reid, who's worked tirelessly to coordinate the meetings here. He makes this happen. And I must say, a big thanks to Harold Johnson, who I dropped in the deep tonight. I connected in here 10 to 8, and my audio was up dead, so I had a computer to get it going. Sorry about that. So Harold, thanks again, and thanks to the audience. We've got a good audience tonight, lots of questions, and I'm going away tonight with a lot of food from both Rodney and yourself. All I can do is thank you. So
Thank you.
we'll close off there. Good luck to the both of you. And
And if anybody else has any other questions, reach out.
Yeah, you'll find me.
do you want to? Anybody there want to ask any questions? This is a good night before we close off. Any of the panel there, Harold or George there? All went very quiet. We've already went on for too long. Okay. So don't tell anything coming up. Look, well, we better sign off there, and thanks very much again, folks.
Okay.
Okay.
Congratulations, okay.
Thank you. God bless. Thank you. Bye bye.